So there's only a couple things on this review that were not on the review from yesterday. So I'll go over those, and if you need help with the rest of them, send me an email, send me a picture of something you need help with, or look at the video from yesterday. So I'm going to look down at numbers 5 and 6 here. Remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. I'm not going to do those directly, but if you remember, well, I'll just make another one up. I to the 37th. How's that? So if we want to figure out how many I squares there are in here, there's not an even number of pairs, right? So whenever there's odd to begin with, you're going to have an I or a negative I as your answer. So what I would do is split this up into I to the 36 times I, and then I can deal with that I to the 36. Now, how many pairs are there is what you're looking for. So if you take 36 and divide it by 2, you end up with 18. So this is I squared to the 18, and then there's that I that's left over. Remember that I squared is equal to negative 1, so this is negative 1 to the 18th. So what you're going to have to do there is negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 18 times, right? But all you have to remember is that if there's an even number of negatives, it's going to be positive. So if there's an even number of negatives, it's going to be positive. So this is going to be positive I. Okay, when there's an odd number of negatives, then it's going to be negative. So I'm going to make up another one here. What if I do I to the 39th? So again, I'm going to drop it down to an even with a leftover I. And so that I to the 38th I can split into pairs. I squared, and you just do 38 divided by 2, so 19. And so now I have 19 negative ones. So if it's an odd number of negatives, it's going to be negative. So this is going to be negative 1I. Okay, so that's what you're thinking. You want to think how many pairs of i's are there. I mean, if all else fails, you could literally write out I squared as many times as it takes to get to the exponent that you need. Just a quick reminder on these, when you're solving the equation, make sure it's equal to 0 first. If it's not, move things over to make it equal 0. And then once it's equal to 0, either solve by factoring, so you can factor, or you can do the quadratic formula. So those are your two solving choices. If you go down and look at number 11, when you move these over, you're going to then combine like terms. So that positive b is going to become a negative b, and that positive 7 is going to be a negative 7. So combine those like terms together, drop the b squared, and then you're ready to solve it. Okay, as soon as it's equal to 0, then you can do factor or the quadratic formula. Remember, the quadratic formula will work for anything, but factoring will not always work. So if the factoring doesn't work, then do the quadratic formula. So on to the back page here. When you're solving a system of equations, make sure, they're both equal to y, so you can set them equal to each other. And then it becomes a lot like the ones on the front. So you're going to set that equal to itself, or to the other one. And then you get it equal to 0, move these over, and combine like terms, and solve. So it's really nothing different. You just have to set them equal to each other and then solve it. The other difference, once you get your x values, make sure you then plug them in at the end. So plug in to find the y values. Don't forget to do that. Okay, 14 solved by graphing. Use your graphing calculator to graph that, get a graph. You can use the graphing calculator to find the solutions, or you can find the solutions by graphing or the quadratic formula. So whenever it says to solve, I don't care if you use the quadratic formula or factoring, whatever works for you, and that will give you your zeros. So I'm just pretending here if this was x equals 2 and negative 3, you would put those solutions on the graph and then draw your parabola, um, just a quick sketch, something like that. But the zeros, the solutions, are on the x-axis every time. Now, those are not the right solutions for this one, but that's what your graph is going to look like. 15 and 16 says write a quadratic equation with the given roots. Write the equation in the form like that. So make it look like a normal quadratic equation. So if these are the roots, this is what x equals, right? X equals negative 1 and x equals negative 5. So we did this once before. You want to get it to where it's equal to 0. You're kind of unsolving this. So if you move that negative 1 over, then it says x plus 1 equals 0. So there's one of your factors. The other one, if you move that over, this is x plus 5. So there's another one of my zeros. To get the equation, all you have to do is multiply these together. So multiply those together, and you're just distributing there. Don't forget to distribute both the x and the 1, and then you got your equation. Just combine like terms. The last two says to solve with the quadratic formula. If it tells you to solve with the quadratic formula, chances are factoring is not going to work. You could try with factoring, but I'll tell you these will not work. So when it says to use the quadratic formula, make sure you use it. Remember, this is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, so if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Our test will be tomorrow, so make sure you're looking for that in Schoology. It will be on the McGraw-Hill website, so you'll go make sure you're logged into Google Chrome, and then it will be in the 9 dots with all the Google apps in the top right, and find the McGraw-Hill. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask.